Welcome back to Refactoring Paleo Rose, where we take a 20-year-old app and modernize it. My name is Tom. In this episode, we're going to look at the settings panel, or should I say the preference panel, and move it to Swift. Now, we've already done some of this work before in the last episode where we're taking a screen and just migrating it to SwiftUI. This one's a slightly different. Like the previous screens, it doesn't do too much, but what it does do is kind of important. So we have the current panel right here, known as the preference panel. It only has one setting. It sets how a calculation method is going to be done, whether it's done by a standard method or a different method. The panel itself has a contradictory name. As I said, it says preferences, but the OS today, the modern OS, uses the word settings. So we need to modernize that. And like I said, the previous screens are very similar to what this one is. It's just a zip file. We just need to create a SwiftUI file and replace it with what we had in the zip. But the one difference is that it uses UserDefaults. UserDefaults is a good way to store user data between documents and between runs. The way it's being used here is going to be a bit of a problem because we have it in Objective-C, now we're moving it to SwiftUI. I'm sure you're probably all thinking, well, SwiftUI has a method for it, Objective-C has a method for it. It's just fine. Not the way I like it. At least not the way I like it today. I should say I used a lot of Windsurf in this episode and the previous one. I'm not going to show you a lot of it because there's a lot of trial and error. But one of the two things I like about Windsurf is the ability to set up rules and workflows. The rules and workflows I have in this particular project right now are a work in progress. And they're always going to be a work in progress. Times change, the models change, etc. You're going to set these up a little bit different over time. For this project, I have a set of rules that I can follow, or I should say Windsurf should follow. I basically define how I want Windsurf to work on the code. It is a very simple set of rules. It's actually kind of long, but you can look at it into the project file because it's a little hard to describe, but it is there. Flow is sort of another form of canned prompt. This one is basically something you do over and over that the AI can help you with. An example one I have right now in the project is a commit prompt. I have a particular way of liking to do commits. When I'm using a Kanban board, I have a card number for each one, so I know I can identify what cards they are. And I put that into the branch. So what this prompt will do is look at the branch, figure out what the card number is, and then write a commit message with the card number and describing what changes have been made on the branch. So this is a couple of things that you can do to make things a little bit nicer while you're working. It's not required, but it helps. What were the goals of this particular episode? One is get that panel out of the zip into SwiftUI. To prepare user defaults for both SwiftUI and AppKit. The AI helped quite a bit on both of these steps. So you might remember what the panel looked like. It was really super simple, not much to it. But through a little bit of work with prompts, I got the AI to design what you see here. It's a little repetitive, but it's better than what I had. And it's good enough for right now. My goal right now isn't to make this thing pretty. But it isn't really trying to do anything new compared to what the old version did. The model actually put this into SwiftUI, and I think it's a little bit more clear what's going on. But I will say that there's some parts of this I need to make sure are wordsmithed a little bit better, and then also making sure it's in the localization tool. So let's take a brief look at the original panel code. There's only two methods in here, await from nib and change vector calc. Await from nib just pulls the value out of UserDefaults and sets it in the pop-up that's there. And then the next method is that interface builder action where we change the value when the user changes. Also, again, very, very simple. My problem with this code, however, is that the keys are strings. I do not like these keys as strings. That's how it's built, but there's no reason that we have to actually use strings directly like this. We can put these strings away somewhere where we don't have to use them. Now, why don't I like them? One major reason is that I can misspell anything in that string. I can miscapitalize it, anything like that. And I have absolutely no support from the compiler saying that it's wrong. So if I typed vector calculation method with a lowercase c, that key may not work. And it may be storing data somewhere else than I expect. So let's get rid of these string keys and move them to something else. So for the SwiftUI, this property wrapper, of course, is for SwiftUI, and it uses all our string values wrapped in enums, user default keys. So every enum that we have in the app has been moved to user default keys. So now by using a key, as you can see under default storage, I'm using vector calculation method, I will now have compiler support to make sure that is the right key or spelled correctly. It will help, and it will generate an error if that key doesn't exist. There's also an extension UserDefaults class to allow the use of the UserDefaults key. So I can use the same keys in SwiftUI, UIKit, and Swift in general. But I don't believe it's compatible with Objective-C. So it's going to be something we're going to, as we move to Swift, we're going to be expanding the use of this particular type. There are some tests that have been created. I'm not sure if the coverage is complete yet. But right now, some tests are better than none, is what we had. And again, most of this work has been done using SwiftUI. Okay, now we're in Xcode. As you can see, we can see the default storage being used in our new settings view. Now, this code is far more complicated than what we had for the old version, but the old version was actually hiding all its complexity in the zip file. And I'm not particularly fond of zip files anymore, so this is a better solution. But one thing that I don't feel comfortable with is localization strings. That's something I'm going to look into later. It's not really part of this card, but it's something I'm going to go through and double check. So this is the SwiftUI view, and wrapping it is a window controller that takes the SwiftUI view and just sets an estimated size window and creates it. A bit like what we were doing with the other window. But the meat of this particular project, the card, is the user defaults keys. So the AI went through the app, found all the keys that we're using, and applied it to this enum. So now whenever I use this enum, I have support from the compiler to recognize that the keys are correct. Well, I should say the strings. That's another matter. Default storage is the property wrapper. Now, this property wrapper is a little bit complicated. That's okay. The AI did it relatively quickly. And it will work with us in SwiftUI to not only provide a value, but a default value when it's not 0. So that was fairly straightforward. And in addition, we have the UserDefaults extension, which allows us to use the key and to set and retrieve our value. And the documentation, of course, that you see there was also done using Windsurf. So this has been relatively straightforward. I will say the AI choked quite a few times. I'm not really happy with the tests so far that we have it. Here's the test around the keys, test around the extensions, and test around the actual storage. So we have a lot of tests built up around all of this. Whether or not we have good enough coverage, I haven't really evaluated that, but that's something I'm going to be doing in the future. So next time, we're going to look at something different. We'll probably look at format. I have 2 formatters used in this application that are custom, that I built myself 20 years ago. I don't know if they're necessary anymore. So we're going to look at what I have, what might work in the future, and then we'll implement some sort of solution. Until next time, my name is Tom, and enjoy refactoring Powerlevel.